Narcissistic men are often perceived as intensely heterosexual because they pursue women, seek relationships, marry, have children, and build lives that appear conventional. On the surface, everything fits the cultural picture of masculinity. They date, flirt, propose, become husbands, become fathers, and participate in all the rituals that society associates with traditional male identity. From the outside, there appears to be nothing unusual about the direction of their romantic life. If you judged only by appearances, you might conclude that romantic love is the central force shaping their decisions. They pursue women with determination, invest heavily in courtship, speak passionately about finding the one, and often move quickly toward commitment when the relationship enhances their image or fulfills an emotional need. They may lavish their partner with attention, expensive gifts, public affection, and grand declarations of devotion. Friends and family see what appears to be a man deeply in love, fully committed to building a future with the woman he has chosen. From the outside, it is easy to believe that love is the engine driving everything he does. After all, he wants the relationship, he wants the wedding, he wants the family photographs, the vacations, the anniversary celebrations, and the appearance of a successful home life. He may proudly introduce his partner to colleagues, post carefully selected pictures on social media, and speak about her as though she is the greatest blessing in his life. These behaviors naturally lead observers to assume that romantic love occupies the center of his emotional world, but appearances can be deceptive. The true measure of emotional investment is not found in public displays of affection or relationship milestones. It is found by asking a different set of questions. What has the power to make him feel genuinely worthy? Whose opinion determines whether he sees himself as successful? Who can elevate his confidence with a single compliment or destroy it with a single criticism? Where does his attention naturally drift when no one is watching? When these questions are asked, the emotional landscape sometimes looks very different. For some narcissistic men, the relationship is not the emotional destination. It is one component of a much larger pursuit, the pursuit of admiration, status, and validation. Love becomes intertwined with identity management. The partner is valued not only for who she is, but also for what she represents. She may symbolize success, desirability, achievement, or social prestige. Being with her reinforces the image he wants the world to see. This does not necessarily mean that his feelings are entirely fake. Human emotions are rarely that simple. He may genuinely feel affection, attraction, and attachment. Yet those feelings often coexist with another, more powerful motivation, preserving and enhancing his sense of self. That is why his behavior can sometimes seem contradictory. He may shower his partner with affection one day, only to become emotionally distant the next. He may insist that she is the love of his life while consistently placing his reputation, career, or public image ahead of her emotional needs. He may speak endlessly about commitment while showing little curiosity about her inner world. To someone on the receiving end, this contradiction can be deeply confusing. The words sound loving, the gestures appear romantic, but the emotional experience feels strangely one-sided. The relationship often revolves around how it reflects on him rather than how it nurtures both people. Consider what happens when a conflict arises. In a healthy relationship, disagreements usually become opportunities for understanding. Both partners are motivated to repair the connection because preserving emotional closeness is the priority. For someone with strong narcissistic traits, however, the priority may shift. Instead of asking, "How do we solve this together?" the internal question often becomes, "How does this affect my image?" If admitting fault feels like humiliation, accountability becomes difficult. If apologizing feels like losing status, defensiveness replaces vulnerability. Protecting the ego takes precedence over protecting the relationship. This is one reason many partners describe feeling emotionally unseen. They are present in the narcissist's life, but they are not always central to his psychological world. His deepest concerns may lie elsewhere. He worries about being respected. He worries about being admired. He worries about staying ahead. He worries about how others perceive him. These concerns quietly shape many of his choices, even when they appear unrelated to the relationship. The irony is that the relationship itself often becomes another source of validation. A beautiful partner, a successful marriage, or an ideal family life can all strengthen the image he presents to others. From the outside, it looks like devotion. Internally, however, part of the investment may be directed toward what the relationship says about him rather than the emotional intimacy it creates. This distinction is subtle but significant. A person who loves primarily for connection wants to know their partner more deeply over time. They become increasingly interested in their partner's thoughts, fears, dreams, and emotional experiences. The relationship becomes richer because both people continue discovering one another. By contrast, when the relationship mainly serves self-esteem, curiosity often fades once the partner has fulfilled the desired role. The focus shifts toward maintaining the image rather than deepening the connection. Emotional growth gives way to performance. That is why many narcissistic relationships appear impressive from the outside but feel lonely from within. Observers see romance. The partner experiences emotional distance. Observers see confidence. The partner witnesses insecurity hidden beneath control and defensiveness. Observers see a successful couple. The partner feels like she is sharing her life with someone who is constantly performing rather than simply being present. Ultimately, this is why appearances alone can be misleading. A relationship can look passionate, stable, and deeply committed while still revolving around the narcissist's need for admiration rather than mutual intimacy. The defining question is not whether he has a partner or even whether he expresses love. The deeper question is whether love itself remains the highest priority or whether the relationship has become another stage upon which he seeks validation, significance, and the reassurance that he is worthy in the eyes of the world. But when you begin looking beneath the surface at the emotional structure rather than the visible behavior, a different pattern can sometimes emerge. The question is no longer who they sleep beside, but what their emotional world actually revolves around. It becomes less about physical attraction and more about psychological investment. Who has the power to make them feel significant? Whose approval truly alters their mood? Whose admiration becomes necessary for them to feel valuable? Those questions often reveal far more than the visible outline of a relationship. Before exploring this idea further, an important distinction must be made. This pattern does not describe every narcissistic man, nor is it part of the formal diagnostic criteria for narcissistic personality disorder. Many men with narcissistic traits genuinely love their partners, and many heterosexual men naturally value the opinions of other men without it being pathological. The discussion here concerns a specific psychological dynamic observed by many clinicians and researchers. That in some narcissistic individuals, identity is organized more around status, competition, and external validation than around authentic emotional intimacy. This distinction matters because people often confuse emotional orientation with sexual orientation. They are not the same thing. A man can be completely heterosexual in terms of sexual attraction, while psychologically organizing his life around the admiration, competition, respect, and recognition of other men. The issue is not who he desires physically. The issue is whose judgment ultimately determines whether he feels successful, important, admired, or worthy. For many narcissistic men, romantic relationships become one arena among many where self-esteem is managed. The relationship itself may appear passionate, devoted, or even ideal from the outside. Yet beneath that appearance, the emotional center of gravity often lies somewhere else entirely. To understand why, it helps to understand what narcissism actually protects. Contrary to popular belief, narcissism is not simply excessive confidence. Many psychologists describe narcissism as a defense against profound insecurity. Beneath grandiosity often lies an unstable sense of self that never developed a lasting internal feeling of worth. Because that inner foundation feels fragile, the individual depends heavily on outside confirmation to maintain emotional stability. Instead of feeling valuable simply because they exist, they feel valuable only when someone reflects greatness back to them. This is why admiration becomes psychologically addictive. It temporarily quiets the fear of inadequacy. It briefly silences self-doubt. It creates the illusion of completeness. But like any external source of regulation, its effects never last very long. Soon another achievement becomes necessary, another compliment, another audience, another victory, another reminder that they matter. The search never truly ends. When you examine the daily behavior of many narcissistic men, you begin noticing where enormous amounts of emotional energy are invested. Career becomes more than work. It becomes proof of superiority. Money becomes more than financial security. It becomes evidence of importance. Luxury possessions become more than conveniences. They become symbols of dominance. Physical appearance becomes more than health. It becomes competitive currency. Social influence becomes more than connection. It becomes status. Again, none of these pursuits are unhealthy in themselves. Ambition, financial success, fitness, and professional excellence are all positive goals. The difference lies in the psychological meaning attached to them. A psychologically healthy person can enjoy achievement while remaining emotionally stable when recognition disappears. A narcissistic person often cannot. Without admiration, achievement loses much of its emotional value. The accomplishment itself matters less than what it communicates. And who is often imagined as the audience? Very frequently, other men. The expensive watch is noticed by male colleagues. The luxury vehicle is admired by competitors. The executive title earns respect from other businessmen. The athletic body wins comparisons inside the gym. Even the beautiful partner may unconsciously function as evidence of status within male social hierarchies. In this sense, the relationship itself sometimes becomes another achievement rather than the emotional destination. The woman is no longer simply loved, she becomes proof that he succeeded, proof that he is desirable, proof that he outranks someone else, proof that he has what others want. This objectification is subtle. He may genuinely care for her, he may protect her, he may provide financially. Yet emotionally, she risks becoming part of an identity project rather than an equal participant in genuine intimacy. This is one reason many partners describe feeling strangely invisible despite receiving expensive gifts, vacations, or public displays of affection. Everything appears impressive, yet something essential feels absent. They sense they are appreciated more for what they represent than for who they are. The relationship serves the narcissist's image as much as, or sometimes more than, the relationship serves emotional closeness. Another revealing pattern appears in conversations between narcissistic men and other men. Notice how quickly discussions shift toward competition. Who earns more? Who has greater influence? Who owns the better house? Who dates the more attractive woman? Who commands greater respect? Who has more authority? The comparison rarely stops. Life becomes a ranking system. Every interaction unconsciously answers the question, where do I stand? If another man receives recognition, the narcissist may feel diminished. If another man experiences failure, the narcissist may secretly experience relief. Someone else's success is not simply information. It becomes personal, because identity itself depends upon relative position. This constant comparison explains why narcissistic men sometimes appear emotionally exhausted despite enormous accomplishments. Every victory immediately creates another contest. There is no finish line. Someone else always exists who is richer, more successful, more attractive, more admired. The hierarchy never ends. Consequently, neither does the anxiety. Inside romantic relationships, this dynamic often creates confusion. A partner may spend years believing that if she becomes more loving, more patient, more attractive, or more supportive, the emotional distance will finally disappear. Yet the distance remains. Why? Because the relationship is competing against something far larger. It is competing against an endless pursuit of external validation. No amount of love can permanently satisfy a psychological hunger built upon comparison. Only temporary relief is possible. This also explains why admiration often matters more than intimacy. Admiration asks very little. It requires performance. Intimacy requires honesty. Admiration celebrates perfection. Intimacy reveals imperfection. Admiration creates distance between observer and performer. Intimacy removes that distance completely. For someone terrified of vulnerability, admiration feels much safer than authentic closeness. A crowd can applaud without truly knowing you. A spouse cannot. Real intimacy eventually uncovers insecurity, fear, shame, dependency, need. These experiences threaten the grandiose identity the narcissist has worked so hard to construct. Therefore, emotional closeness frequently triggers discomfort rather than peace. Ironically, the deeper someone loves them, the more exposed they begin feeling. Instead of moving closer, they may become defensive, critical, withdrawn, controlling. Not because closeness is undesirable, because closeness threatens the protective mask. This creates one of the most painful paradoxes in relationships involving narcissistic traits. The partner mistakes emotional withdrawal for lack of love. Sometimes it reflects something more complicated. It reflects fear of being fully seen. When people only admire you, they see the image. When people truly know you, they eventually see the frightened human underneath. For someone whose identity depends upon appearing exceptional, that possibility can feel terrifying. Many clinicians have observed that narcissistic individuals frequently divide people into functions rather than relationships. Some people provide admiration, some provide opportunities, some provide status, some provide emotional labor, some provide practical support. Each relationship unconsciously serves the stability of the narcissistic self. When someone stops performing their assigned role, conflict often begins. A romantic partner who once provided endless admiration may eventually express disappointment. She may ask for reciprocity. She may establish boundaries. She may stop validating every accomplishment. Suddenly, the relationship feels threatening, not because she changed dramatically, but because the mirror stopped reflecting the perfect image. This is why idealization often transforms into devaluation. The individual who once seemed extraordinary suddenly appears disappointing, not necessarily because she changed. Because her psychological function changed, she no longer maintains the illusion of perfection. An especially revealing indicator appears during moments of public humiliation. Imagine two different situations. In the first, a romantic partner quietly disagrees with him in private. In the second, another respected man publicly questions his competence. Which wound feels deeper? For many narcissistic men, the second scenario is devastating. They may think about it for weeks, replay it endlessly, become consumed by fantasies of revenge. Why? Because public humiliation threatens status. Status determines identity. Identity determines emotional survival. The criticism itself matters less than the audience witnessing it. Likewise, praise from respected male authority figures often produces extraordinary emotional highs. A compliment from an admired mentor, recognition from a successful businessman, approval from a respected father, validation from influential peers. These moments often carry enormous psychological weight because they temporarily repair feelings of inadequacy. For a brief period, everything feels stable again. Unfortunately, the stability depends entirely upon continued external approval. As soon as admiration fades, insecurity quietly returns. Another fascinating aspect involves emotional expression. Many narcissistic men struggle to express vulnerability with their romantic partners. Yet they may become surprisingly animated discussing achievements, competition, sports, business, or social victories with other men. Their emotional intensity suddenly increases, their confidence expands, their energy changes. It is as though they become fully alive inside competitive environments. Again, this is not evidence of hidden sexual attraction. It reflects where identity is being constructed. Competition becomes emotionally stimulating because every victory strengthens the self-image. Intimacy feels emotionally dangerous because every vulnerability risks weakening it. This difference explains why some partners feel they receive only fragments of emotional attention while careers, reputations, and social standing receive limitless investment. The partner wonders, why does he fight harder for respect at work than for peace at home? Because work provides measurable status. Relationships require emotional maturity. One reinforces the narcissistic identity. The other challenges it. This imbalance often leaves partners feeling profoundly lonely. Not because conversations never happen, not because affection never exists, but because authentic emotional presence remains inconsistent. The narcissistic individual may listen only when the conversation supports their self-image. Moments requiring empathy, accountability, or emotional reciprocity often become significantly more difficult. Another consequence involves chronic restlessness. Even after enormous success, satisfaction rarely lasts. The long-awaited promotion finally arrives. Excitement lasts several days. Then attention shifts toward the next promotion. The luxury car is purchased. Admiration arrives. Soon another model becomes desirable. Recognition loses its emotional impact with remarkable speed. Psychologists sometimes describe this as narcissistic supply. External admiration functions like emotional fuel, but because it comes from outside, it must constantly be replenished. No compliment lasts forever. No achievement permanently resolves insecurity. No relationship can continuously provide unlimited validation. Consequently, the pursuit becomes endless. This endless striving often confuses romantic partners. They ask, when will enough finally be enough? The painful answer is that external validation can never permanently replace internal security. No amount of applause creates lasting self-worth if the underlying identity remains unstable. Many narcissistic men also struggle with genuine mutuality. Healthy relationships involve two independent people influencing each other. Needs move in both directions. Support flows both ways. Compromise becomes possible because neither person's identity depends upon always appearing superior. For someone organized around narcissistic defenses, equality can feel surprisingly threatening. If another person possesses equal emotional authority, the illusion of superiority weakens. Therefore, control often becomes psychologically comforting. Control protects image. Image protects identity. Identity protects against shame. The deeper layer beneath all these behaviors is often shame rather than arrogance. This is perhaps the greatest misunderstanding surrounding narcissism. People see confidence. The clinician often sees fear. People see entitlement. The clinician often sees fragile self-worth desperately defending itself. People see emotional coldness. The clinician may recognize profound terror of dependence and rejection. None of this excuses harmful behavior. Understanding is not the same as justification. People harmed by narcissistic behavior still deserve boundaries, protection, and accountability. Yet recognizing the psychological mechanisms helps explain why these patterns repeat so consistently. At the center of many narcissistic personalities lies an unresolved developmental wound. Instead of learning, I am worthy because I exist, they unconsciously learned, I am worthy only when I outperform everyone else. That belief transforms life into permanent competition. Relationships become performances. Friendships become comparisons. Success becomes emotional survival. Failure becomes psychological catastrophe. Even love becomes conditional upon maintaining superiority. Eventually, this way of living becomes exhausting. No victory feels permanent. No admiration lasts forever. No achievement finally quiets the insecurity underneath. The external world cannot permanently stabilize an identity built upon unstable foundations. This is why genuine psychological healing requires far more than increased confidence. It requires developing an internal sense of worth independent of comparison. It requires learning that vulnerability does not destroy dignity, that intimacy is not weakness, that love is different from admiration, that respect is different from fear, that being fully known is more meaningful than merely being highly praised. When that shift begins, relationships also begin changing. A partner stops functioning as a mirror reflecting greatness. She becomes a real person with independent thoughts, feelings, needs, and imperfections. Other men stop functioning primarily as judges, whose approval determines self-worth. They become equals rather than constant competitors. Achievement remains valuable, but no longer defines identity. Success becomes enjoyable instead of emotionally necessary. Failure becomes disappointing instead of devastating. Perhaps most importantly, love gradually stops being another performance. It becomes a place where two imperfect people can exist without constantly proving who deserves to stand above the other. That is the profound difference between a life organized around narcissistic validation and a life organized around authentic connection. One is fueled by endless comparison and external applause. The other is sustained by emotional honesty, mutual respect, and an identity that no longer depends on winning every invisible contest. While not every narcissistic man follows this pattern, understanding these psychological dynamics helps explain why some relationships feel strangely empty despite appearances of success. Beneath the polished image, the true struggle is often not about sexuality, romance, or masculinity at all. It is about an individual searching for a stable sense of self in places where lasting security can never truly be found. Their deepest emotional investment is not always directed toward their romantic partner. Instead, it may be invested in status, admiration, competition, and the approval of other men. This observation is not about sexual orientation. It is about where emotional significance and identity are anchored. It is important to be careful here. This pattern does not apply to every narcissistic man, and it is not a diagnostic criterion for narcissistic personality disorder. Rather, it describes a dynamic that many psychologists and clinicians have discussed in relation to narcissistic traits, the tendency to organize one's identity around external validation, particularly within male hierarchies. Many narcissistic men grow up believing that love is conditional. They learn early that acceptance depends on performance, achievement, strength, or superiority. As adults, they continue chasing the feeling they never fully received. Their romantic relationships often become another arena where they seek admiration, but the audience they care about most is frequently other men. Notice how much energy some narcissistic men devote to proving themselves in male-dominated environments. They obsess over career titles, income, expensive possessions, physical dominance, athletic success, social influence, or being perceived as the man. None of these pursuits are unhealthy by themselves. Ambition is normal. The difference lies in the emotional intensity attached to them. A healthy person enjoys success because it reflects meaningful work or personal growth. A narcissistic individual often experiences success primarily as proof of superiority. The achievement is less important than what it communicates to others. Who are those others? Very often, they are other men. A promotion matters because male colleagues will envy it. A luxury car matters because other men will notice it. An attractive partner matters because she becomes evidence of his status in front of male peers. Even conversations about romantic relationships may become performances designed to establish dominance. Stories are exaggerated, victories are highlighted, and vulnerabilities disappear. Relationships become trophies rather than intimate connections. This is why some partners eventually feel invisible. They begin realizing that they are not loved as independent human beings, but appreciated as symbols. The woman becomes part of the narcissist's personal brand. She reflects his success. She enhances his image. She increases his social value. But the emotional audience remains elsewhere. Psychologically speaking, narcissism often revolves around shame. Beneath grandiosity lies an unstable sense of self that constantly seeks reinforcement. Because identity feels fragile, admiration functions almost like emotional oxygen. Without it, the narcissistic self begins to collapse into insecurity, humiliation, and self-doubt. Male approval carries particular weight because many narcissistic men unconsciously organize the world as a hierarchy of winners and losers. Within that hierarchy, men represent competitors, judges, rivals, and authority figures. Winning their admiration feels like winning existence itself. This helps explain why some narcissistic men appear emotionally detached from their wives while becoming intensely animated around male friends, business associates, coaches, or mentors. Around women, they may seem emotionally unavailable. Around admired men, they suddenly become energetic, expressive, competitive, and eager to impress. Again, this does not reflect hidden sexual attraction. It reflects psychological dependency. The validation they receive from respected male figures temporarily repairs their fragile self-esteem. This dynamic can also explain why criticism from another man often devastates a narcissist far more than criticism from a romantic partner. A wife may express disappointment repeatedly without producing lasting change, but a respected male colleague making one dismissive comment can trigger days of rage, obsession, or humiliation. Why? Because the criticism threatens the identity he has been trying so desperately to construct. Similarly, praise from another successful man can produce an emotional high that lasts for days. His confidence suddenly returns, his mood improves, his sense of importance expands, the external approval temporarily fills the emptiness inside. Romantic relationships, unfortunately, often suffer because intimacy requires something narcissism struggles to provide. True intimacy involves equality. It requires mutual vulnerability. It asks two people to know each other beyond appearances. But narcissistic defenses are built specifically to avoid exposing vulnerability. Instead of emotional closeness, the narcissist often substitutes admiration. Admiration feels safer than intimacy. Admiration creates distance. Love requires openness. Admiration only requires performance. As a result, many partners describe feeling emotionally lonely despite living with someone who constantly talks about love, loyalty, and commitment. The words are present, the emotional availability is not. Much of the narcissist's psychological energy remains invested in maintaining an image rather than nurturing a relationship. This is why achievements often become addictive. There is always another promotion, another purchase, another competition, another audience, another opportunity to prove superiority. The validation never lasts. It fades quickly, demanding another accomplishment to restore the inflated self-image. Many psychoanalytic thinkers have described narcissism as an endless search for mirroring. The narcissist wants someone to reflect back an idealized version of who they believe themselves to be. Romantic partners are often expected to play this role, but so are bosses, mentors, influential friends, and admired competitors. Whoever provides the strongest reflection temporarily becomes psychologically indispensable. The problem is that real relationships cannot survive when one person exists primarily as a mirror. Eventually, mirrors stop reflecting perfectly. Partners develop needs. They express disappointment. They ask for reciprocity. They point out inconsistencies. When that happens, the narcissist may respond with defensiveness, anger, withdrawal, or devaluation because the mirror has stopped serving its function. Interestingly, many narcissistic men devote enormous effort to appearing dominant while privately feeling controlled by the opinions of others. Their freedom depends on approval. Their confidence depends on applause. Their identity depends on comparison. They appear powerful, yet psychologically they remain remarkably dependent. This dependence is often hidden beneath confidence. Outwardly, they seem fearless. Internally, they constantly ask invisible questions. Am I winning? Am I respected? Am I admired? Am I better than him? Narcissistic self-esteem is built on comparison rather than inner security. Their sense of worth depends on status, achievement, and the approval of others, often within male hierarchies. As a result, failures or successes outside the relationship frequently spill over into their romantic life, causing their partner to absorb emotions that have little to do with her. Because their identity relies on external validation, another person's success feels threatening, and admiration never provides lasting satisfaction. This creates a cycle of comparison, insecurity, and emotional emptiness that no partner can permanently heal. Genuine change requires replacing the pursuit of validation with self-awareness, accountability, and authentic intimacy.